You've always been the family charity case, so don't get emotional about this. That was the sentence sitting in my phone like a thumb pressed against my throat. Jessica's private message glowed on the screen, smug and casual, like she was doing me a favor instead of stealing something that belonged to me. I didn't throw the phone, I didn't reply, I didn't even blink. I just leaned back in my chair and let the insult land where it always did, quietly, where nobody ever bothered to check for damage. I was sitting in my home office when the notification pinged. Family group chat, same ringtone I'd never bothered to change because it never mattered. Jessica's message popped up first, dressed in celebration emojis. Finally buying Mara's beach house at foreclosure auction. Bank listed it for $400,000, worth at least $2.8 million, getting it appraised next week. We can flip it or keep it as family vacation property. I reread it slowly. Beach house, foreclosure, auction, each word wrong in a way that made my chest feel oddly light, like the moment before a storm breaks. Dad responded within 90 seconds, like he'd been waiting for a chance to prove something. Wired you $200,000, your mother and I are in, Mom followed. About time that place got put to good use. Then Trevor, my younger brother, chimed in like a kid asking for a slice of cake. Can I get in on this? Have $50,000 to invest. Jessica wrapped it up. Family only. Already have the down payment ready. Auction is Thursday. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then lowering. I didn't say a word. I opened my banking app instead. Mortgage account. Closed. Balance $0. 3 weeks earlier, I'd made the final payment. Not because I had to, because I wanted the silence that comes with owning something outright. A $1.2 million early payoff. No confetti, no congratulations. No group chat announcement. The house was mine, free and clear. The beach house they were celebrating didn't exist the way they thought it did. It wasn't in foreclosure, it had never missed a payment. The bank wasn't selling it. And nobody but me had the deed. That's when my phone buzzed again. Private message, Jessica, don't worry about the house. I know you're struggling. This way it stays in the family. You can even visit sometimes if you ask nicely. Struggling. That word had followed me for 6 years like a nickname I never chose. When I bought the place in 2019, they said I was reckless. When I skipped holidays to work, they said I was lonely. When I drove the same car year after year, they said I couldn't afford better. They never asked, they just decided. I looked around my office, floor-to-ceiling shelves, quiet hum of servers behind a hidden panel. The kind of room you build when you don't need applause, the kind of success that doesn't show up in Instagram stories. I could have corrected them right then. One message, one screenshot. One, actually, but people like my family don't hear corrections, they hear challenges, and challenges make them defensive, careful, harder to hurt, so I stayed quiet. If you're enjoying stories where patience beats power, take a second and subscribe. These things always start small and they never end the way people expect. I scrolled back through the group chat, the emojis, the money transfers. The confidence? They were already spending a house that wasn't theirs, planning memories they hadn't earned, congratulating themselves for outsmarting a version of me that lived only in their heads. What none of them realized was this. I hadn't been struggling, I'd been preparing, and Jessica hadn't just insulted me. She'd stepped into something she didn't understand, with receipts she hadn't checked and a lie that was about to grow teeth. I set my phone face down on the desk and opened a new document on my computer. I titled it with the property address and today's date. Calm hands, steady breathing, no anger, just focus. They thought Thursday was auction day. I knew exactly what Thursday was going to be, and I was going to let them walk all the way to the edge before I showed them where the ground actually ended. How a small-town family learns the danger of mistaking silence for weakness. They like to say we came from nothing, but that wasn't true. We came from a place where attention was the real currency, and I learned early that I didn't have much of it. Our town sat between 2 highways and a grain elevator, the kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did. Friday nights meant high school football, Sunday mornings meant church, and success was measured by how loudly you could announce it without anyone calling you out. My parents loved that rhythm. Jessica learned how to perform inside it. Trevor learned how to coast. I learned how to disappear. Jessica was the golden one from the start. Straight hair, straight A's, loud laugh that filled rooms. Teachers loved her. Neighbors remembered her name. When she talked, adults leaned in like something important was about to be said. When I talked, conversations politely drifted elsewhere. Trevor was the project. Always figuring things out, always needing help, always getting second chances dressed up as encouragement. If he failed, it was because the world hadn't been fair yet. If I failed, it was because I hadn't tried hard enough. I didn't hate them for it. That's the part people get wrong. I just noticed. I noticed how my parents would ask Jessica about her day, then glance at their phones when I started answering. I noticed how Trevor could borrow money without explaining why, while I'd get a lecture for asking to keep what I earned. I noticed how silence became safer than honesty, so I got good at being quiet. After high school, Jessica went to a state university and came back with stories. Trevor bounced between majors. I took a job 2 towns over and didn't talk much about it. When I skipped Thanksgiving one year because of a deadline, Mom told everyone I was struggling with balance. I didn't correct her. I rented cheap, drove used, wore the same jacket for years. In a town like ours, that labeled you fast. People stopped asking questions when they thought they already knew the answers. What they never saw were the nights I stayed up learning skills nobody around me valued yet. The spreadsheets, the contracts. The long, boring work that doesn't look impressive until it compounds. I didn't chase applause, I chased leverage even if I didn't have the word for it yet. When I bought the beach house in 2019, I told them it was a stretch, that it was risky. I let Dad warn me. Let Mom sigh, let Jessica shake her head like she just watched someone make a predictable mistake. It was easier that way. Every mortgage payment I made felt like a secret handshake with my future self. Every year I didn't upgrade my car bought me more options later. I learned something important during those years. People who underestimate you will gladly do half your work for you as long as they believe the story they've written. They wrote mine as the quiet one who never quite made it, and I let them, because being underestimated is a strange kind of freedom. Nobody watches your hands, nobody checks your math. Nobody imagines you could be setting something in motion while they're busy congratulating themselves. By the time I finished paying off the house early, the narrative was set in stone. Jessica was the smart one, Trevor was the hopeful one. I was the one who meant well. So when that group chat lit up, when they started moving money and making plans around a lie that somehow involved my own property, it didn't shock me. It confirmed something I'd known since childhood. They didn't see me, not really. And when people don't see you, they walk straight into traps they never imagine were built by someone standing right in front of them. The first hairline crack in Jessica's story, and the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding at all. The first time I realized Jessica didn't just misunderstand my life but actively rewrote it was years before the beach house ever entered the picture. It happened at my grandfather's funeral. We were standing near the back of the chapel, the air heavy with old carpet and cheap flowers. People from town kept coming up to us, offering condolences, then drifting into small talk the way they always do when grief makes them uncomfortable. Someone asked what I was doing these days. Before I could answer, Jessica smiled and said, "He's still figuring things out, you know how he is." She said it kindly, almost gently. Like she was smoothing over an awkward truth so no one else had to feel uneasy. I remember nodding along because correcting her would have caused a scene, and scenes were never worth it. But something clicked in me that day. I realized Jessica wasn't just assuming things about me, she was deciding them. And once she decided, she spoke with a confidence that made people stop questioning. Over time, I noticed the pattern everywhere. If I missed a family event, she'd tell people I was overwhelmed. If I kept details vague, she'd fill them in with her own version. If I succeeded quietly, she reframed it as luck or timing. And every time, the room accepted her story without asking me. So when I went back through the beach house messages later that night, I didn't just read what was said, I read what was assumed. Foreclosure auction, bank listed it. Family only, those weren't careless words, they were deliberate. They framed her as the hero, the rescuer, the organizer, and me, I wasn't mentioned at all. That was the tell. If this were a simple misunderstanding, she would have checked, called me, asked a question, especially about a property she knew I'd owned. But she didn't, because questions create uncertainty and uncertainty weakens control. Instead, she built a narrative where I didn't matter. That's when I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old email archive and started searching her name. Jessica had always liked paperwork, forms, titles. Being the point person, when our parents needed help with something financial, she volunteered. When Trevor needed help structuring an opportunity, she stepped in. She liked being the gatekeeper. Buried in my inbox were forwarded documents from years ago, things she'd asked me to review casually back when I was good with numbers. Power of attorney drafts, authorization forms. Emails where she'd CC herself on things that didn't involve her directly. At the time, it felt like overhelping. Now it felt like a habit. I cross-checked dates, cross-referenced addresses, then I pulled the public records for the beach house. Clean title, no liens, no notices, nothing, but when I looked deeper, farther than most people bother, I saw something interesting. Someone had requested an outdated foreclosure notice from a third-party listing service, not the bank. Not the county, a private aggregator that scraped old data and repackaged it for auctions that didn't always exist. And the request email matched a pattern I recognized immediately: Jessica's phrasing. She hadn't discovered a foreclosure. She'd created the appearance of one, not to steal the house outright. That would have required more courage than she had. No, this was subtler. This was about positioning, about convincing the family that she was stepping in to save something that, in her mind, I was bound to lose anyway. And that realization landed with a strange calm, because this wasn't just entitlement, it was rehearsal. She'd been practicing this move for years, talking over me, reframing me, making decisions about me without ever including me. The beach house wasn't the beginning, it was the boldest version yet. If this story is pulling you in, stick with it. These moments always look small until you see how they connect. I closed my laptop and stared at the dark reflection in the screen. Jessica thought Thursday was her victory lap. She thought she was managing risk. What she didn't understand was this. When someone builds their power on assumptions, all it takes is one missing piece to make the whole thing fold in on itself. And I had just found the thread she'd been pulling for years. How I realized exposing her wasn't enough, and why letting her succeed first was the smarter move. There's a moment when you realize telling the truth won't save you, it'll just warn the people lying. That's the moment I hit sometime after midnight, sitting alone in my office with the lights off, watching the city glow through the window like it didn't care who owned what. I had everything I needed to shut Jessica down immediately. Screenshots. Records, proof so clean it could have ended the entire conversation in 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is all it would have taken her to pivot. She would have laughed it off, claimed confusion, said the auction must have been canceled. Turned it into a misunderstanding. And my family, my loyal, predictable family, would have nodded along, relieved they didn't have to question the version of reality they already preferred. I'd be the dramatic one, the sensitive one. The struggling sibling lashing out because he felt left out. No, that wasn't justice, that was noise. Real leverage requires patience. And patience was something I'd been training my whole life without realizing it. Growing up overlooked does that to you. You learn to wait, to watch patterns instead of reacting to moments. You notice who speaks first, who follows, who fills silence because they can't stand it. Jessica filled silence, always had. She couldn't stand a vacuum where her voice wasn't shaping the room. That meant if I stayed quiet, she'd keep talking, and talking people eventually contradict themselves. So instead of confronting her, I leaned into the role she'd already assigned me. I sent one short message to the group chat the next morning. Didn't realize the place was in foreclosure. Hope it all works out. That was it. No accusation, no pushback, no correction. Jessica responded with a heart emoji. Dad replied, proud of you for being understanding. Mom said, everything happens for a reason. And just like that, the door closed behind them. They moved forward with confidence. Wired more money, made plans, talked about repainting, redoing the deck, turning the guest room into something useful. They spoke like owners do, bold, careless, assuming the ground beneath them was solid. Meanwhile, I started preparing in ways they couldn't see, not by stopping them, by letting them commit. There's a difference between catching someone in a lie and letting them build a life on it. One embarrasses, the other reshapes how they see themselves. I reviewed every document Jessica had touched, every email she'd sent on behalf of the family. Every assumption she'd made without verifying. She was good, but she was rushed, and rushed people leave fingerprints. She'd already promised too much to our parents, to Trevor, to a realtor friend she'd bragged to. Each promise was another thread tied to her reputation. Another reason she couldn't back out cleanly, and that's when I understood something important. I didn't need to expose her, I needed to let her succeed first. Let her stand in front of everyone confident and admired, explaining how she pulled it off. Let her enjoy the attention she craved. Let her build momentum, because momentum is heavy. And when it stops suddenly, it doesn't just halt, it collapses. I scheduled nothing, sent nothing, corrected nothing, I just watched. If this kind of slow burn control fascinates you, stay with me. The quiet moves are always the ones people miss until it's too late. By Wednesday night, the family chat was buzzing like a launch countdown. Trevor was asking about profit splits. Dad was talking about legacy. Mom was sending beach daycare ideas like the keys were already in her hand. Jessica was in her element, organizing, directing, being seen, and all of it was balanced on a single assumption she'd never bothered to confirm. The truth about power is this: you don't use it to interrupt someone mid-sentence. You use it to let them finish talking, then remove the floor they were standing on. The hidden truth about how Jessica had been using family trust for years and why this time it was going to cost her more than pride. The problem with people who borrow authority instead of earning it is that they start believing it belongs to them. Once I stopped looking at Jessica's beach house story as a one-off lie and started seeing it as part of a pattern, things came into focus fast. This wasn't boldness, it was habit. She had been using the same move for years, small enough to avoid resistance, confident enough to avoid scrutiny. She positioned herself as the responsible one, the organizer, the translator of complex stuff for the rest of the family. And because nobody wanted the responsibility she claimed to carry, nobody ever checked the weight of it. I went back further: old emails, group threads, family projects that had fizzled out without anyone really understanding why. A cousin's short-lived business idea, a temporary loan Dad mentioned once that never came up again. Trevor's mysterious tax confusion that Jessica had handled. Individually, they looked like nothing. Together, they formed a map. Jessica didn't steal outright, she redirected, rounded numbers, parked money briefly. Created delays that only she understood, always justifiable, always framed as helpful, always complicated enough that people waved it off with relief when she said, "I'll take care of it." The beach house wasn't her first attempt to manage something that wasn't hers. It was just the biggest stage she'd ever stepped onto. What made it dangerous for her was that this time I wasn't confused. I wasn't intimidated, and I wasn't asking permission to understand. I noticed how she never used official bank portals when sharing information. Screenshots instead, summaries instead of statements. Trust me, language layered over technical terms she knew our parents wouldn't question. She relied on fatigue, on the idea that people don't want to feel stupid so they nod along, and she relied on me staying quiet. What she didn't account for was that the quiet sibling learns to read between lines because that's where they live. By Tuesday afternoon, I had reconstructed her version of the foreclosure from scratch. The source she cited, the timing she chose, the emotional hooks she used to get buy-in fast before anyone slowed her down with logic. She'd rushed because she needed momentum, and momentum meant money moving before questions started. I watched as Dad sent another wire, as Trevor followed up asking where to send his share, as Mom forwarded Jessica a list of friends who might want to rent it. Every step forward made backing out harder. That's when I realized something else. Jessica wasn't doing this to me, she was doing it around me. In her mind, I was a background character, someone whose presence didn't alter outcomes, someone who would accept whatever version of events she narrated the way I always had. That blind spot was the opening. I didn't need to confront her lies, I needed to let her expand them until they required public explanation inside the family where her power actually lived. No police, no courts. No outside authority swooping in to declare a winner, just reality arriving all at once with nowhere left to redirect it. I prepared one thing that night and one thing only: clarity, clean timelines, clean records, no accusations. No commentary, just facts, arranged so simply that even the most loyal listener would feel uncomfortable ignoring them. I didn't plan to speak over her, I planned to let her speak first. Because the more someone talks to protect a lie, the more visible the shape of it becomes. By Wednesday evening, Jessica was riding high, confident, warm, generous with praise. She sent me another private message. Hope you're okay. This is a big change, but it's for the best. For the first time, I smiled, not because I was angry, because she thought the story was over, and it hadn't even reached the part where she realized she was standing alone. Why Thursday morning didn't go the way Jessica rehearsed, and how one simple question started unraveling everything she'd built. Thursday morning arrived the way most turning points do, quiet, ordinary, pretending to be just another day. Jessica texted the group chat early, too early, the kind of message you send when you're buzzing with nerves but want to sound effortless. Big day, auction at 11, will update after. Dad replied with a thumbs up. Mom sent a beach emoji. Trevor asked if he should be on standby to wire more funds. I didn't respond. By then, I understood the final truth Jessica hadn't accounted for, the one that made everything she'd built fragile in a way she couldn't see. Her power didn't come from money or intelligence or even confidence. It came from being believed without question. The moment someone asked her to slow down to explain instead of summarize, she'd lose her footing. And this time, slowing down wasn't optional, because auctions don't work on vibes and screenshots. They work on names, numbers, and authority, and Jessica didn't have any of those. Around 10:30, my phone buzzed, private message. Everything's fine, just some paperwork delay. That was the first crack. Real auctions don't have paperwork delays an hour before bidding. They have strict deadlines, registrations, deposits verified days in advance. Anyone who's done this once knows that. Jessica hadn't. She was improvising now. At 10:45, Dad posted in the group chat, "Do you need anything from us?" Jessica didn't answer right away. When she finally did, it was longer than usual, just waiting on confirmation from the listing service. These things move slow. They don't. But the family didn't know that, and more importantly, they didn't want to know. Wanting to believe someone is powerful insulation against doubt. I let the moment stretch. At 11:15, Trevor asked, "Is bidding live?" No response. At 11:30, Mom sent, "Everything okay?" Still nothing. Then, at 11:42, Jessica called me. She hadn't called me directly in years. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was tight, controlled, but underneath it, I heard the thing she never showed the family: uncertainty. "There's been a complication," she said. "The bank says the property isn't eligible." I stayed silent. "They're saying it was paid off," she continued. "Recently, must be an error." Still nothing from me. "Did you know anything about that?" she asked, carefully. That was the moment she finally acknowledged me as relevant. I didn't answer her question. I asked one of my own. "Who told you it was in foreclosure?" She hesitated. "Just a beat too long. A listing service," she said. Why, I could have ended it right there, could have said the words, could have dropped the truth like a hammer, but I didn't, because this wasn't about correcting her. It was about letting her feel what it's like when control drains out of the room and leaves you standing there, exposed, trying to hold together a story that no longer wants to cooperate. "I think you should explain that to everyone," I said calmly. "Together." She didn't respond. 5 minutes later, she posted in the group chat, "Looks like the auction was canceled last minute. Will update once I know more." Canceled. Dad replied, "That's odd." Mom said, "But you said." Trevor typed, then deleted, then typed again. Questions were forming now, not accusations, just curiosity. And curiosity is lethal to people who survive on assumption. Jessica tried to regain control by over-explaining. Too many details, too much reassurance. Promises to sort it out and get clarity. But clarity doesn't belong to the person who needs it most. It belongs to the one who already has it. I watched as the tone shifted. Subtle, polite but different, less awe, more distance. The family wasn't angry yet, they were confused, and confusion is the beginning of separation. How one calm, public conversation did what confrontation never could, and why Jessica's reputation didn't collapse loudly but quietly in real time. Jessica asked for a family call that afternoon. Not because she wanted to explain, because she needed to reclaim the room. We hadn't done a full video call in years. Group chats were easier, controlled, you could edit yourself, choose silence when it suited you. Video stripped all that away, and when the notification popped up, I knew exactly why she'd chosen it. She wanted to be seen again. Mom and Dad joined first, sitting together at the kitchen table like they always did. Trevor logged in from his apartment, half distracted, pretending this was no big deal. Jessica appeared last, framed carefully, shoulders back, voice warm. "Okay," she said, smiling, "let's clear this up." She spoke for 10 straight minutes. About how auctions were unpredictable, about third-party listings, about banks changing things last second, about how frustrating it was when you were trying to do something good for everyone and systems failed you. She used all the old tools: tone, pace, familiar authority. She didn't accuse anyone, she didn't admit fault. She floated above specifics, trusting the family to fill in the blanks the way they always had, and for a moment it worked. Dad nodded, Mom frowned sympathetically, Trevor leaned back, arms crossed, waiting to be told what to think. Then Jessica turned to me. "Do you want to add anything?" she asked, not sharply, kindly. Like she was offering me a courtesy I hadn't earned. I didn't rush, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't challenge her story head-on. I asked one question: "Can you show us the foreclosure notice you used?" Silence, just a beat. But it stretched. Jessica blinked. "I already explained." "I know," I said calmly. "I'm just asking to see it." Dad leaned forward. "That seems reasonable." Jessica smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's from a listing service. Not an official document." "I understand," I said. "Can you pull it up?" Another pause. The thing about asking for receipts is that it sounds harmless, cooperative, almost boring, but it forces reality into the room. Jessica shared her screen. It was exactly what I expected. A generic listing page, no bank letterhead, no county seal, outdated language, the kind of thing anyone experienced would have questioned immediately. Trevor squinted. "That's it?" Jessica jumped in quickly. "Those services aggregate data," Dad interrupted her. Gently. "Why didn't you verify it with the bank?" The shift was subtle, but it was there. She tried to recover, explained how fast things were moving. How she didn't want to miss the opportunity, how she assumed. There it was, that word again, assumed. Mom asked quietly, "Did you talk to your brother about it?" Jessica looked at me. "I didn't think it was necessary." That's when I spoke again. "I paid the house off 3 weeks ago," I said. "There was never a foreclosure." No anger, no emphasis, just a statement. The call went still. Dad's face changed first, not to rage, to something worse: embarrassment. Mom's eyes dropped to the table. Trevor let out a slow breath. Jessica stared at her screen like it might save her. I didn't pile on, I didn't explain further, I didn't accuse her of intent. I let the truth sit there on its own, heavy and undeniable. If you're still with me, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this aren't about shouting, they're about timing. Dad cleared his throat. "So, where did the money go?" That was it. Not "why did you lie," not "how could you," just "where did the money go?" Jessica started talking, fast, too fast, explaining transfers, holds, delays, saying it was safe, that she'd sorted out. But the room had changed. They weren't listening to her anymore, they were listening past her. Because once someone loses credibility, every word they speak feels like a defense, even when it's true. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say anything else. She'd done the rest herself. The aftermath, how losing trust costs more than money, and why Jessica didn't walk away angry, she walked away smaller. The call ended the way most collapses do, not with shouting, not with slammed doors, but with polite goodbyes that felt heavier than accusations. Mom said she needed to start dinner. Dad muttered something about needing air. Trevor logged off without his usual joke. Jessica was the last to disconnect, her smile frozen until the screen went dark. After that, the family chat went quiet. Not dramatic quiet, not angry quiet, just empty. No beach emojis, no renovation ideas, no "we'll figure it out." The momentum she'd built evaporated in a single afternoon, and what replaced it was something she'd never had to deal with before. Distance? Dad called me later that evening, not to apologize, not even to explain, just to ask questions, real ones this time: how long I'd owned the house, why I paid it off early, what I planned to do with it. For the first time, he listened without interrupting. Mom texted the next morning asking if she could visit sometime, not as an owner, not as a planner, as a guest. Trevor sent a short message: "Didn't realize how much you had going on. Respect." Jessica said nothing. That was the cruelest part, not because I wanted her pain, but because silence was the one tool she'd never learned to use. She had always controlled the narrative by filling space. Now the space didn't belong to her anymore. Over the next few days, small things shifted. Dad stopped looping Jessica into financial decisions automatically. Mom double-checked details instead of forwarding summaries. Trevor started asking me questions directly about investing, about work, about how I thought through risk. Jessica wasn't excluded, she was just no longer central. And for someone who built their identity on being indispensable, that kind of loss cuts deeper than confrontation ever could. She tried once to regain footing. Sent a long message to the group chat explaining lessons learned, framing herself as the victim of bad information. Nobody argued with her, nobody praised her either. The message sat there with 2 polite reactions and no replies. That's when it sank in. Power doesn't disappear in a fight. It disappears when people stop waiting for you to speak. I never told anyone what I suspected about her past redirects or half-truths. I didn't need to. The family had learned something more important than the details. They'd learned that Jessica could be wrong. And once that door opens, it never fully closes. If you've ever watched someone lose influence without realizing it, you know how unsettling it is. No villain speech, no dramatic downfall, just fewer invitations, fewer assumptions. Fewer moments where their word carries weight. That's the kind of revenge that lingers, not because it humiliates, but because it rewrites the future quietly. Jessica still shows up, she still talks, but she talks slower now, explains more. Checks for reactions she never used to need. The room doesn't orbit her anymore, and I don't correct her. I don't need to. If this story is hitting something familiar, make sure you're subscribed. The end isn't about winning, it's about what happens after the win when everyone has to live with what they learned. One night I walked through the beach house alone. Same ocean sound, same floorboards. Same view I'd earned piece by piece while they were busy assuming I'd never get there. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. The justice wasn't that they knew the truth, it was that they finally had to see me without the story they'd written to make themselves comfortable. And Jessica, she still hasn't apologized. She doesn't need to. She already paid in the only currency she ever valued. The final reckoning, what quiet strength really looks like, and the moral my family learned too late. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It never does. It came in pieces, spaced out over weeks, the way truth prefers to settle when nobody is rushing it. Dad stopped offering advice about money and started asking for it. Mom began telling friends, my son owns a place on the coast, without adding qualifiers or excuses. Trevor asked if I'd look over a deal he was considering, then actually listened when I told him to slow down. Nobody announced a change, they just behaved like people who had quietly updated their understanding of the world. Jessica faded into the background of those moments, not erased, not punished, just recalibrated. Her opinions were weighed instead of accepted. Her plans were reviewed instead of approved. When she spoke, people nodded, but they also waited to hear from others, including me. One afternoon, months later, she showed up at the beach house unannounced. No entourage, no agenda, just her, standing awkwardly on the deck like someone visiting a place they used to imagine owning. It's nice, she said. It is, I replied. She waited for more, for reassurance, for forgiveness, for something she could frame as resolution. I didn't give her any of it. We talked about neutral things, weather, travel, the tide. She left after an hour, polite and quiet, like someone who finally understood the rules of a room they'd misread for years. That was the last time she tried to position herself above me. The family never sat down and named what happened. There was no apology tour, no dramatic reckoning, but the shift was permanent and everyone felt it. They had learned that confidence without verification is just theater. That the quiet person in the corner might be the one holding the actual cards. And that comfort stories about who's successful, who's struggling, who needs managing are often just ways to avoid looking too closely. I didn't take anything from them, I didn't need to. The house stayed mine. The respect arrived late, but it arrived honestly. And the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was earned. If this story meant something to you, take a second to like and subscribe. Quiet wins don't look exciting in real time, but they're the ones that last. I still don't talk much in family gatherings, I still let others speak first. Not because I have to, but because I don't need to prove anything anymore. That's the part nobody tells you about being underestimated for so long. When the truth finally lands, you don't feel loud, you feel light. The beach house hasn't changed. The ocean doesn't care who almost bought it. It just keeps moving, steady and indifferent, the way real power always does. And if there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple and it's final. Never underestimate the person who stays low, says less than they know, and keeps working while everyone else is busy talking.